guys, it's Sarah, and today I want to talk about my top 10 most surprising books of 2018. So these are the books that surprised me based on what I thought I was going to feel about them versus what I actually did feel about them. And these are going to be both good and bad. So I have 5 positive, 5 negative, and let's get started. All right, let's do the bad first. Let's just go ahead and get those out of the way. These are 5 books that I was expecting to really enjoy, and I did not at all. All right, let's start with Stephen King, Gerald's Game. I did not enjoy this book, you guys, at all. It ended up being different than what I thought it was going to be, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I was kind of on board with that at first, but the further along the book went, the more I didn't like it. And then towards probably a little bit more than halfway through, it took a really weird time jump. And then we were reflecting on what had happened, but I was listening to that and thinking, I want to know about that. Like, why didn't we have that in real time, when this book was happening? So I wish it wasn't a reflection thing. I wish it was an actual, we were like, this is happening and this is going on. And it could have gone into so much detail about that. And that's what I wanted and did not get it. So this one was very disappointing and I gave it 2 stars. The next one was a 5-star prediction and I gave it 2 stars. And that's Night Film by Marisha Pessl. This is a book that I really, really expected to love because it is dark. It's a thriller. It's supposed to mess with your mind, which it does. But I didn't enjoy it. Usually I do enjoy that stuff, which is why I thought I was going to give it 5 stars. And this follows the death of a girl, and her father is a very well-known and well-loved horror director, and like to a point where he almost has a cult following. He's also very reclusive. He never leaves his house, and he's a very mysterious person, but everybody is drawn to him for some reason. And anyone who comes into contact with him almost becomes obsessed with him. And so his daughter dies, and it's assumed that it's a suicide, but a lot of people are thinking maybe it wasn't, and, trying to figure this stuff out. So we follow a journalist who had gotten in trouble with the director in the past for kind of slandering him. And so he lost a lawsuit and everything, and he's supposed to stay away from this family. However, this girl shows up dead, and he ends up kind of getting involved with it again and trying to investigate stuff and everything. Yeah, I don't know. I felt very weighed down by this book, and it was a chore to get through it. It wasn't fast paced the way I wanted it to be. There were some action scenes that were good. Like, I enjoyed some of them. There was a point in here where I was picking it up and wanting to keep going, but it wasn't even half of the pages in here that I was excited to read. So, and there is some multimedia stuff in here that were interesting, like kind of screenshots of websites and stuff. So that I enjoyed kind of going through, but overall it was a big disappointment, and I did not like the ending at all. And, we hit an apex part where that's supposed to be probably the most exciting chapter. Oh, we're finally at this point. And I skimmed it because I did not care, and kind of nothing happened. So I was over it at that point. And yep. So 2 stars. Okay. The rest of these books I don't physically own, but the first one is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. I don't understand this book. I read it. I remember parts of it, but for the most part, I didn't understand it, and I don't really remember a whole lot. I know it's like a dystopian, and it's, government and pills and controlling people, and that's what I can tell you. And I gave it 2 stars. The next one is Unburied Carol by Josh Malerman. This is a book that I was actually sent for review, so I did read it, and I don't know. This was my first Josh Malerman book. It didn't turn me off from him as an author. I still really want to read some more of his work. But a lot of people who really enjoy his books didn't enjoy this one too. So I don't think it was just me. But it's hard to explain. It's kind of a magical realism book, and it's like a Western, and, it's historical, and I don't know. It's about this woman who can see ghosts and stuff, or she ends up being able to go into a coma, but she's not dead, but people think she's dead, but she's not dead. like people can look at her and assume that she is, but she's not. And in that state, she can see like certain things, and it's very scary for her and all this stuff. And her husband one day decides that the next time she goes into this place, she needs to just go. She needs to die, like actually die and get buried and all that stuff, because he was getting tired of dealing with it. So there's this whole thing, and there's like this crazy assassin who was pretty messed up too. And it's hard for me to describe it, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I really, really wanted to. I think I gave it 3 stars. Like, it was just okay for me. It didn't turn me off from him as an author again. I do still want to read like Bird Box and stuff like that. But yeah, I didn't enjoy it as much as I really wanted to. The last one that I was pretty disappointed in is The Zookeepers Wife, and this is written by Diane Ackerman. And this one, I was expecting to really enjoy it because the premise is really good. It's about a family who are zookeepers, and it's during World War II, and they end up taking in Jewish refugees to hide them from the Nazis during the war at a zoo. That sounds so interesting, right? Nope. It was so boring. It was really boring, you guys. And I almost DNF'd it, but I didn't. I kept going because it was on my birthday reading project. I was like, nope, I'm not going to DNF any of these books. So I did push through and finish it, but it really didn't, I didn't get that story from the book at all. I got a lot of chapters about bugs, which were really weird, and just characters who kind of came and went with no explanation. And I didn't get it. I really didn't get it. Someone actually told me it was a nonfiction, which is interesting, or it's based on a true story. Maybe that's what it was. But yeah, no, I didn't like it because I didn't feel like I got that premise at all that I was given. Okay, so let's talk about the books that surprised me in a good way. The first one is Unsub by Meg Gardner, and I loved this book. This is the first book in a series, and it follows an FBI detective who hunts serial killers. Now, the serial killers in these books are inspired by real serial killers. And the first one, he is inspired by the Zodiac Killer, and you can definitely see some of the similarities. It's not exact, but it's there. You know, he very much taunts the police very publicly, and they can't find him. They can't figure out who this guy is. And it's someone that actually had killed 25 years ago and then had disappeared for 25 years, and now he's back. And it was so good. It was so fast paced. It was so interesting. And, you know, quite a few things were very shocking. I remember flying through this, and I loved it so much. I did read the second book in the series as well. I didn't like it as much as the first one, but I liked it enough that I want to keep going. If she writes more books, I really hope she does. And the second one, the serial killer, was based on Ted Bundy. So very charming and handsome and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But he's a serial killer. So it was very good. I really, really enjoyed the first one for sure. I actually think I want to maybe get a physical copy of it because I did read it on my Kindle. I haven't gotten one yet, but I think like that would be one I would want on my shelves because I loved it that much. The next one that was pretty intimidating for me and ended up really surprising me is Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. And this is one surprised me in a couple different ways. Number one, how much I ended up loving it. Number two, it took me a while to get into this one. It took probably a good quarter of the book before I was like really invested. And there were footnotes in here, which kind of threw me off at first, but I ended up really enjoying them after a while. Once I kind of got used to, you know, seeing the footnotes and reading them and stuff. But this is it's an adult fantasy. I was going to say YA, but I don't think it's YA. It's pretty adult. And it follows a young girl named Mia, and she is basically in training to be an assassin. And you're seeing her go through training and, you know, meeting people and building allies and enemies and all that stuff. And she's there for a very specific reason. She wants to avenge the death of her father, who she feels was killed wrongfully by a certain group of people. And oh my gosh, was this good. It was so good. It was very twisted. The humor in here is fantastic as well. There is a cat that is a sidekick, and he is fantastic. He's almost like a shadow cat. And he's so good. He's like, the humor is on point in here. And I loved it so much. Again, it took me a little bit to get into, but once I was into it, like I was goner. That was it. And I loved it. And I can't wait to read the rest of the series. The second book is already out on my shelves. Third book is coming out later this year. And yeah, so I absolutely loved it. The next one is also the first book in a fantasy series, and that's An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. I loved this book from start to finish, and it surprised me. I was expecting to enjoy it and to like it, but oh my gosh, I became obsessed with it. It is so good. This follows a young girl named Leia, and she has lost her parents, and her brother has been kidnapped by the government. So she ends up going to this kind of secret underground society and asking for their help to get him out of jail, because they're really the only ones who can help her. Now, in order to do this, they ask a favor for her. It's kind of like a payment. So she ends up posing as a slave and goes into this military, like kind of a military academy where they're raising soldiers, you know, to kind of do the government's bidding. And while in there, she forms an alliance with one of the soldiers in training who, you know, he's got some issues of his own, and that's all I'm going to say. But it is so good, you guys. Like, if you like fantasy and you haven't read this, please pick it up. It is so good. I think it's also probably a good introduction to fantasy as well. Like, I think even if you're not into fantasy all that much, you could read this and enjoy it. The characters are so fantastic, very complex, very, you know, it's a lot of gray areas happening in here, and I loved it. It's so action-packed as well. It was almost action from like start to finish. It was fantastic. I loved it, and I love the characters, and I can't wait to continue with this one too. And the next one that really surprised me is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. And this one, I was so intimidated going into it because it's a big book, as you can see, and I was afraid of it being too whimsical, if that makes any sense. I read Laini Taylor books before, and her writing is beautiful, but it is very whimsical. And I was afraid that I would get lost in that and, you know, not be able to get the story quite as well because of it. But that is not the case here. It was very easy to read. It is pretty flowery, and the writing is very lyrical, but it makes sense as well. So it's not something that you would just get lost in. You would get lost, but in a good way. You get lost in the story. And I loved it so much. And the characters are so great in here. And again, just like tortured characters are just in here, and they are so great. And this took a couple twists that I did not see coming, which was fantastic. And I loved it. I loved every second of it. I don't want to really give too much away, but it is, you know, a fantasy book, and it follows a librarian named Laszlo Strange, and he is obsessed with this lost city called Weep. And there's a reason it's kind of a lost city, and it's almost considered a myth, but he knows it's real, and he finds out that it is real, and he gets to go there for a very specific reason. And it's so good, you guys. It is so, so, so good. I just got Muse of Nightmares in the mail, and I cannot wait to pick it up and read it. It's going to be happening very soon. And I loved it. If you have ever had any interest in reading this, I highly recommend that you do. And the last one that I want to talk about was a very pleasant surprise. I was not expecting this book to be as good as it was and make me feel emotions that I felt. And that is Snowflower and the Secret Fan by Lisa C. Now, this was on my birthday reading project, and so I read it because of that. And I went into it, you know, just like, okay, this sounds like it'll be interesting. And oh my gosh, did I love this book. I absolutely loved it. It is so heartbreaking. The characters are very complex and just, they do things and you understand why, but then you don't agree with it, but you understand why. And you really get a feel for the culture that was happening in here. This follows, you know, very old Chinese cultures, and there is an entire chapter in here on foot binding that I almost couldn't stomach, and it made me sob. I was sobbing in this book. And you guys know that I do not cry in books very often. It takes a lot to make me cry. And I was sobbing. Like, I had to put it down for a second and clean myself up because I had tears streaming down my face. Oh my gosh. And this is definitely, it's a very sad book. So, like, don't go into this expecting happy-go-lucky stuff. It is not. It is not. But it does follow a very unique relationship between two girls. And yeah, it's very, very good. It's very good. I enjoyed it so much, and I did not expect that at all. So this was definitely another one that really surprised me. Okay, guys, that is it. So those are my top 10 books that took me by surprise this year, either good or bad. Let me know down below if you read any of these books I talked about. Let me know what your surprises were this year. Did you expect to love something, but then you ended up not loving it? Or did you go into something not expecting to love it, but then you absolutely loved it and it became a favorite book of yours? Let me know down below. And I will talk to you guys again soon. Hope you have a great day. Bye.